everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
And it's Jeremy from Tested.
Welcome to Projections, our show about virtual reality and augmented reality. You know, a game that we can't stop talking about between ourselves recently is Echo Arena.
That's right, with good reason. I mean, this game came out for 3 days in an open beta from Friday morning until Sunday night this past weekend. And it just took the VR community by storm. Everybody's talking about this game, and I think it comes down to a few reasons. One is the locomotion that this game has.
Yeah, so as you guys may know, if you've tried VR, haven't tried VR, one of the problems inherent in game design for VR is how do you get players moving in the virtual space, right? You think it's so simple. You just move a thumbstick or you move a D-pad, but a lot of that creates nausea. And some games do allow you to do that and to move, translate throughout the world using finger controls. But what we want once we have that headset on is that perfect one-to-one movement in our bodies. And unfortunately, not every VR setup can accommodate that.
And people are sensitive to different degrees to that kind of thing. I mean, there are many first-person shooters that allow you to walk through the world, but it's not for everybody. I mean, people have a problem with this. They call it VR sickness. And for whatever reason, Lone Echo got it right. And it could be for a number of reasons. One, when you throw yourself through this world as a zero-G environment. So you are going in a straight line and you never decelerate until you reach another wall or another object, and then you stop immediately. Like there's no acceleration and deceleration curve, which I think is crucial.
The conservation of momentum is something your brain fundamentally understands. It's not necessarily a completely new mechanic. The Mission ISS demo, for example, used a very similar zero-G grab and hold mechanic, but it just works in this implementation. We first saw it at Oculus Connect 3 in a single-player form. That's a Lone Echo, the game. And Echo Arena is going to be the free multiplayer component. That's what they had the open beta for this past weekend. And it does things that on paper feel like they should be breaking the rules of VR. That should be motion sick. One, they represent your entire body. You're a robot. And you can see your body and your feet are dragging behind you even though you're just standing in your room on the ground or even sitting. You can play it while sitting. And two, like you can grab every surface and climb and propel yourself by climbing.
And where you put your hands is generally in the same space where your hands are in VR, but the fingers curl around every object that you grab in a way that your fingers aren't actually doing in real life. But that doesn't break the sense of proprioception, the sense that that is my hand. In fact, it works extremely well. It
works to this game's locomotion mechanics advantage. What you're saying is basically it's Oculus touch-based. This is an Oculus Studios game. And the grab mechanic, you're holding the center button on the controller, right? Which it feels like you're pulling, you know, a trigger on a grip. But your robot hand that you see in game can be braced against a wall. It could be grabbed around a railing. It could be contorted around a peak or something. And as you grab and grab and grab, the animation of the hand is so fluid, but there's no disconnect. You still believe that's your hand.
That's right. Yeah.
That's your real robot hand.
And for everyone who didn't get a chance to play the game, you can grab everything in the world. And since it's zero-G, there's really no up, there's no down. You're just grabbing whatever wall you're on and you're throwing yourself towards another wall or towards an object or even a player. So you can grab the back of another player and you can ride around with them. Now, if you want to give yourself a little extra control mid-air, you have these jets. And if you can go sort of, not the opposite of Iron Man style, right?
Yeah, Iron Man holds his hands out and propels. And these are more having like bracelets that pull you forward.
In the direction that your hands are facing. You also have a boost, so you can give yourself, get a little extra gas. You get 2 of those, but then you cap out at a certain speed, a certain number of meters per second. The other button is a brake, and you come to a halt. Not immediately, but pretty quickly you come to a full stop.
And so all those mechanisms combined, the grabbing, self-propelling, zero-G, having these thrusters, they're kind of analogs to like, you know, an astronaut's EMU suit, right? Flying in space, but obviously more powerful. They all allow you to then, with almost 6 degrees of perfect freedom, navigate a volumetric space. And in this case, it's a big open arena where you have 3v3 in the case of the beta. I think they're going to allow 5v5, but 5 players versus 5 players play basically a game of soccer in 0G.
Right, it's sort of like disc soccer, 0G disc soccer. So everyone is jousting in the beginning towards the center where the disc is held. And everyone's in their launch tubes, and you hold on to one of these catapults, and then it pulls you forward, and then you let go, or you throw yourself if you want to get a little extra speed. You get to the center, first one to the disc wins the joust, essentially. Then the goal is to get it to the other team's side and throw it or dunk it into their goal. If you throw from a distance, you get 3 points. A dunk is 2.
It sounds simple. It sounds like the most basic game, right? Yeah. Get the disc through the rectangle. But there's a lot of depth to it because you have to be in really good control of your character in 0G.
That's right. Your jets on your wrists are only so powerful.
Yeah.
And when you're carrying the disc, you're at a disadvantage because you can't boost, you can't throw yourself actually you go so much slower when you're holding the disc that there's no way to go as fast as everyone else. Even if you throw yourself off of a wall or something like that. The only way to go faster is to hold on to one of your teammates or an opponent if they don't see you coming, and hold on to them while they're going fast. As soon as you let go, you're back to slow speed.
And you can grab any part of another character. You can grab, if I'm chasing someone floating through the arena, I can grab their feet and literally climb up their body. And then there's an attack move. You can punch them in the head, and that gets them real dizzy.
Yeah, and if they're holding the disc, they drop it.
They drop the disc. So it gets pretty physical. It's one of the most physical VR games I've played.
You're doing this. You have no idea which way you're facing. Especially there is a snap turn option so that you can snap, 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 left, right, right. But it's a lot more immersing just to spin your body and play full 360. If you play that way, you have no idea which way's up or which way's forward, where your computer is. It's so immersive. I mean, and there's so many people on Reddit and elsewhere who are saying, well, there goes my glass that was sitting on the table. Somebody broke their Oculus Touch controller. Somebody hit the wall, put a little hole in the ceiling. There's a lot of casualties happening to this game, but it's a good thing.
And that speaks to, one, the design of the actual sport itself. They made it competitive. They're working on balancing it out, but it actually feels like there's depth there. And two, the comfort level that their mechanic allows. People are instantly comfortable in the game, even though you're telling them you're in 0G, you're a robot, you're only grabbing things and propelling yourself around. You're flying a little robot spaceship.
I think most people are shocked at how comfortable this game is.
Yeah.
Given that it is full locomotion, it is translating through the world one-to-one.
Why do you think that is? What do you think they did right in terms of their 0G conservation momentum mechanic that allows it to be comfortable?
Well, especially because you mentioned the ISS has a similar mechanic, and I was motion sick in the ISS, and I read other people who said the same thing, whereas they were sick in the ISS, but not so much in this game. Obviously, they did a ton of research, and they tweaked it until they got it right. I mean, one, like I mentioned, is constant speed. But another thing, I think they obviously don't let you do any yaw control.
Yeah, right. You actually, if you grab an object, you can't twist your hand and turn your whole body upside down.
Like a roll.
Yeah, there's no rolling in this. Your hand actually stays fixed in place, and you just twist your hand almost all the way around.
Yeah, nor can you sort of grab the world and hulk it left and right to twist and spin. I think that's definitely crucial too. But having the open space, that's what makes it really different from the ISS, is there is a gigantic space and I'm throwing myself through it, so I have a moment to get into the motion. And it's also not cluttered with detail. The textures are pretty simple. It's very clear where I'm headed. There's a lot of space, and there's other players around. You certainly have to be aware of 6 degrees, but it's comfortable in the same way that maybe like scuba diving would be.
Yeah, and not because there's no ability to roll. Up is always up for everyone.
Right.
Yeah, so you always know in this arena, in the lobby, you always know relative to where the lobby center is, to where the training area is, it's always going to be in that direction.
You can go into the options and turn on that functionality. You can roll and adjust your pitch with the left stick, I suppose it would be. I didn't try that because, first of all, I don't think there's any advantage to it. But second, I was concerned that would definitely mess with my comfort level.
The other thing I think they do really well is limit what you can grab and how many things you can grab at once. Like if you think about it, if the game let me grab more than one thing at once, grab a virtual table here and grab a railing here, and then I pull my hands together, it would break the mechanic of the game because I'm not actually grabbing on the real things. I'm just moving my hands in free space. But if I can only grab one thing at once, no matter how I move my hand, all it's doing is moving my avatar in relation to the one thing I'm grabbing. Now this does break occasionally because there are objects that you can grab, whether it's a ball or a baseball bat, or that you can get caught in things. And when you get caught, it does a really cool effect where your hand ghosts outside of your robot hand. And if you do too much, then it snaps, it releases the robot hand and snaps it to where your hand really is.
So that helps your brain because you still get to see where your hand in real life actually is?
Exactly, yeah. And I think that actually adds to the comfort and your understanding of where you are in relation to the world and your avatar.
Yeah, they have some liberties with physics too. Like when you're grabbing something and you can do this with your hand and your whole body goes that fast.
Yeah.
Like that's absolutely impossible.
Well, you're a robot.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. But still, the physics of moving a body that large don't work. But it allows you to stay immersed, and that's how you get all that speed when you throw off. Now, what surprised me was the depth of strategies that are involved in playing the actual game.
Just the Echo Arena multiplayer game.
By the end of the 3 days, there was a huge skill delta of people who were still giving it the first try, not even sure how to exit the launch tubes, and people who were ready to work with it as a team and do plays together and play different roles. I mean, at the very basic level, you can move faster than your maximum speed by throwing yourself off another player. So if you line up in the launch tube and everybody grabs each other's back, the first person grabs the catapult, throws the trio off of it and propels them forward at faster than boost level already. Player 2 then does the same thing, propelling them even faster.
It's all relative.
And then the third player does the same thing. If you do that before you get to the disc in the center, you're going at like light speed. And you have to grab it, but you have to be aimed correctly. Like there's a lot of skill, not just in knowing that strategy, but in propelling yourself in the right direction. Because if you go off even a few degrees, there's no way you can correct.
That's so interesting, because even in the open beta, it was 3 players per team max. Once you have 5 players, you're going to be able to propel across the entire map in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, if I'm the 3rd player and I've been launched catapulted out of the arena, one player is then catapulting, second player is catapulting, and I'm catapulting again, I'm not uncomfortable. I'm moving so fast, but my brain is totally okay with it because I have this reference point of what I'm holding on to, and it's just like being in a spaceship moving really quickly. It's all relative movement.
There's a lot of depth. I can't wait to play more of this game. I'm on the Discord channel daily just because that's all I can do. I mean, you can play the tutorial still. If you want a taste of this, you didn't get a chance, I think the open beta is still available for download and home.
Yeah.
Even though
there's a tutorial that you can play the mechanic. The game's gonna be out July 20th. And what really excites me, I think, and us, I think, is that not just this game being, could be the Rocket League of VR, but that it really shows that we are in the early days, and we're finally getting to a point where game developers are coming up with a mechanic that can work for more than just the sports game, this Echo Arena, but can work for a single-player game. I want to see this 0G Locomotion free translation climbing mechanic applied to things like an adventure game, a shooter, and there's a lot of potential here.
Right. Yeah. But then you're talking about like 0G is the baseline template for all VR games. And that might scare people, but I wouldn't be surprised if this does become like what Quake is to first-person shooters. It's like the template. Like Call of Duty is based on Quake on a certain level, perhaps Doom or something like that. But it came up with this system that just works and people dig it. At least a large number of people really dig it. And because this works for so many people, what if? I mean, what if 0G is that template for VR?
And what if you use it but add gravity? What if you vary the gravity?
Then are you messing with it too much then?
I don't know. That's what I want to figure out. Like playing this, all I wanted was like a Spider-Man game where I'd be climbing on the walls and then propelling myself, but have a little bit of gravity. I don't know. Combine Echo Arena with Windlands. What does that mean?
Right. I mean, Climbing does that to a certain degree. Climbing is an excellent game that's available on Steam. And it has this, it's not so much about the walking mechanic or the floating through space. In order to move, you do this jumping thing. And that gets you from one spot to another on the ground. But then you end up climbing a lot, and you can throw yourself, and you can get sort of some of that with the same kind of gravity. And that is surprisingly not nauseating too. But I wonder if a Spider-Man game like that would be pushing it too much to introduce gravity into this system that works, but I'd love to try it.
Yeah, and we're really not speaking hyperbole right now because we're genuinely, like, this is, I think, going to be a game changer for VR. This could be the thing that if you're going to show your friends something and it's their first time using a VR headset, this might be
Echo Arena.
the thing. Echo Arena and Lone Echo might be a thing to get people to convince them that this is something groundbreaking.
And it really is social too, and we've talked before about how Rec Room and other social experiences are, like, they just amps up the VR experience so much. And there are good people playing this past weekend, decent people in the lobbies that are willing to help people who were clearly, they didn't even know how to get out of the chamber when they entered the lobby. You have to pull this thing above you. And they would float over there and say, hey, you got to pull this thing. Yeah, there you go, come on out. Now, see how it feels. And they would introduce you to the game. The devs, of course, were hanging out there trying to get people acclimated. So I am excited for this game.
When your brain isn't thinking about how to get around the world and staying comfortable, then you can really just embrace that social aspect. And people they were comfortable.
Yeah,
you could
exactly.
tell they were just floating around,
passing the toys
out
from one another.
Yeah, just I would not be disappointed if the metaverse in VR ended up being in a giant zero-G space station.
Bring it.
That'd be pretty cool.
So Norm, another game that I saw at E3 a couple weeks ago was a game called Vindicta by a game company called Game Cooks. Small team, man. I mean, this is the early days. This is a team of people that is about 10, I think, including marketing.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, no. So it's you know, bare bones, but they are doing some interesting things with VR. So the graphics aren't right home. I mean, they're not amazing, but they're good. They're good enough. And as we know from VR, it's not about the graphical fidelity, right? Yeah. It's a nice sci-fi world. It's a first-person shooter where they're playing with VR in multiple ways. So first of all, the locomotion mechanic. It's interesting. I've seen it before in a tech demo, and it works well. The way that it works is you hold your controllers. They're developing for Vive, although it's actually, I should say, it's on SteamVR right now in early access if you want to go try it out. Works with it's developed for the Vive currently. You hold down the two pads, and then you move your controllers like this, a walking motion.
So it's almost like drumming, but it's
well, it's like, you know, it's supposed to be like, you know, like a power walk, right?
Now you move your wrists, or you're actually moving your elbows?
It doesn't matter. You're doing like a little doggy paddle.
Okay.
But the cool thing is it's analog in a sense, because the more motion I do, the faster I run. Yeah. So that's the first time I've ever really seen that done in VR with any kind of, you know, walking mechanic.
So it's a fine control.
Exactly.
Because you can gallop if you're doing bigger strides faster, or you can do smaller ones, tiptoe a little bit.
And what's interesting is there's two different ways of controlling what direction you're walking in. One is, by default, the way that I played at E3 is it's relative to your headset. So if I do this, I start to walk towards whatever direction I'm facing. If I look over here, I walk that direction.
Okay.
But there's a setting that allows you to do this. So your controller direction controls what direction you're facing. I think that actually might be preferable, because I was trying to look around corners sometime, you know, walk that way and look around, and you can't do that with the default setting.
Well, it reminds me of a game like Farpoint on PSVR.
Exactly.
Where that movement was through a stick, but it was based on where you're pointing the PS aim control.
Exactly. So I like this locomotion mechanic, and it's actually useful because sometimes you want to get right up to the edge of something before you want to go fast. So you're doing quite a lot of different variations with the motion. So like at one part, there's these fire, you know, walls that come, that's fire, and then they turn off, and you have to run through. You want to get right up to the edge and then book it. So it works well. And they're having you duck a lot, and they're having you climb ladders, which is cool because when you're climbing, you have to holster your weapons. So you've got your pistols, or you've got your single-handed weapon, whatever you have, and then in order to, you come to a ladder, you holster your weapons, and you grab the ladder, and you start to climb up into another level, which it then becomes like one-to-one, almost like Echo Arena, where it's like, you know, my body is relative to my hands. You get to the top, you see an enemy, but you can't shoot him.
Because your weapons are holstered.
And climb the ladder. So you're stuck on the ladder. You grab a weapon, you hold with one hand on the ladder, and then you kind of are like taking cover.
But you have to hold it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
otherwise you fall.
Yeah.
So I like that. I mean, they're playing with VR in ways that I haven't seen yet, and they're combining a lot of lessons that I think we've already had.
Now, when you're walking just throughout the world and you're doing this tap and this gallop, you still have your pistols, your weapons in your hand. So the in-game model, you see your weapons in your hand, you see them moving up and down. Can you walk and shoot at the same time?
Yes. Yeah.
But you'd be shooting sporadically? You'd have to stop and then shoot?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Yeah, you have a lot more accuracy if you're stopping. Yes, absolutely. I'm not sure you can walk with one hand, you know, like if you could do that and fire with the other.
And that could be a conscious decision. Like, I can imagine developers saying, well, yeah, you would need another hand to shoot, so let them aim and use a thumb pad and do the galloping motion. But that's not as intuitive in terms of your hand and your feet alignment as this two-handed motion. That gives you more fine control over the pace of your walking, how big your steps are.
Yeah,
I like that.
In this game in particular, you have to take a lot of cover too. There's a lot of fire coming at you from all different directions, so you want to find your area where you're safe, and then poke around corners. You know, get behind a block or something, and then come up and take a few shots and go back down. So I think that it is probably based around shooting while you're stopped.
How comfortable is it for you?
Very comfortable, and I especially like the ladder stuff when you're moving levels. They make you, at the first part of the demo, you drop. The ground falls out from under you and you fall down. I didn't get sick from that, but it didn't feel exactly right. But besides that, very comfortable, I would say. Surprisingly, this works very well. I mean, I don't know if it's because the motion is tied to my motion, even though it has nothing to do with moving my feet. But something about that is a lot better than putting an analog stick in a game and making you walk forward.
And a lot of developers are experimenting, especially with the Vive pucks coming out, ways to get that kind of backward and forward movement to translate into some type of walking around movement in game, whether it's by attaching it to your hips or even to your ankles and having an up and down stepping motion. Yeah. This seems like a very intuitive way because your hands are, you have really good control of your hands. And also developers, like for the game Sprint Vector, are doing a similar thing.
Exactly.
So for that one, it's much bigger motions.
Right.
And it's about more like gliding and skiing as opposed to being tapping. So I'd love to try it out. It's out on early access right now.
Yeah, and it's going to have a co-op mode coming in a couple months. That's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, as we've said before, co-op in VR is fantastic. I would, if you don't play it now, play it then. I mean, it's going to be even more fun once that is released, I think.
Awesome. That's called Vindicta, and you can find it in the SteamVR store. That does it this week for Projections. We'll be back next week with another game discussion, maybe an interview. Leave your comments below, subscribe to our channel, like this video, and Jeremy and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.